to this week's community meeting, and we've got Dustin here to give us a bit of an update on what's been going on and what he's got planned for the next 2 weeks. So we'll hand it over to Dustin.
All right. Thanks. So it's been a relatively slow period here. There's been a little bit of code changes, a lot of discussion and issues being opened from people getting started with TaskWarrior or asking sort of detailed questions with TaskWarrior in Discord on issues in the various repos. Wes has been doing a good job of answering those. I've been trying to answer them, some other discussion, but I would encourage folks watching this to get involved there and follow the repo and kind of help answer questions because I'm one user of TaskWarrior. I use it in one particular way, but it's kind of a cool product in that people apply this to their lives in so many different ways. So there's lots of different answers and different approaches to solving common problems. So in terms of what's happened over the last week, I think the big thing to talk about is around opening the task database in read-only mode. So a large part of this kind of performance issues that folks have had with TaskWarrior 3 is because every time you run the task binary, it opens up the TaskWarrior database and it actually modifies it. It actually modifies the first block at the last access time. So it's actually like opening the database for reading and writing a little bit to it, and then maybe it just reads from the actual task data. So it was quite a bit of work to kind of thread this all the way through all the different components, but we've reached the point now where the next release will be able to open the database in read-only mode in some circumstances. So the circumstances are commands that don't have to do any modification. So like if you list the reports or if there's a task logo command. I don't know if anyone remembers that one, but it draws the TaskWarrior logo on your command line. So those obviously don't need to be the database. And if you run any of the list or sort of access, the commands that access that show you information from your task database, like burn down or history or anything like that, if the GC config is false, those will open it in read-only mode. And the reason is that if GC is true, then possibly we need to update recurrences on tasks or change the working set, renumber the tasks, and all of those require writing to the database. So taking advantage of this might take a little bit of care in how you set things up. So for example, if you have a script that shows your next tasks in kind of a repeating form on a tab in your terminal or something like that, you'll want to make sure that script is updated so that it uses GC equals 0. Otherwise, it's going to open the database in read-write mode anyway, just in case it would need to update a recurrence or one of those other GC things. But I think this is going to suit a lot of the cases, and especially like if you run burn down, you can run that with GC equals 0, and it should run. Actually, that's a terrible example. Burn down is really inefficient on its own. But history or some of the other reports, run those with GC equals 0. They should run faster and they won't interfere with other things that are running against your task database. So like I said, that's been quite a bit of work to get all the way from Task Champion's kind of storage all the way through TaskWarrior. There's just a lot of components to touch there, but we got to the end of that this week. Other than that, it's been some small stuff around date times, fixing the news, and some Q&A stuff in the issues. But pretty slow. Not necessarily planning on a 3.4 release too soon. I think maybe we'll revisit it in 2 weeks. We'll see if more stuff needs to land for that. So that's about what's going on. I think we've talked about the Python bindings since the last meeting. Yeah, I think that's what we've got to talk about. There's still lots of good first bugs. There's a couple that are assigned to people right now, but there's certainly open space for people who want to do development to find a spot to do either C++ or Rust or both. And I think that really is a great way to kind of contribute to the project and become a bigger part of the project. And it'd be great to have more folks working, because then when I get distracted with life things, as I am now, the project won't slow down automatically. Just other people can keep working on things. And maybe I show up on Saturday and talk about what other people have done for a little bit, and that's my contribution. That would be great. So yeah, I hope people can get involved. Anything you can think of that we've missed?
And as they want to get involved, what's the process for onboarding? Is there a set of community rules that they should
Mhm.
start with or something like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So mechanically, I think anywhere you want to find us is good. So I pay attention to the Discord. You're welcome to ask questions or just tell us you're getting started on something in Discord. And GitHub issues and discussions are a good place to start. So there's a couple issues that are flagged as good first bugs in Task Champion and TaskWarrior and the Task Champion Python repo. Um, and you're welcome to find one of those that looks like something you could work on and comment on it. And I or one of the other engineers would be able to help you out with that. Pretty much, we'll meet you where you are. Um, and in terms of participating in the community, that's an important thing to talk about. There is a code of conduct in all of the repos. It's a pretty standard code of conduct. Just don't treat other people nicely. It's the golden rule kind of code of conduct. So there are rules there, but you should know that we do take pretty seriously treating each other with kindness. And there was a small bit of drama in one of the issues, and we took care of that and sort of went back to the code of conduct and said, this is not the way we behave in this community. We are kind to each other. We're helping each other. We're all learning about TaskWarrior. We're all learning about programming, data structures, all these things. We're all learning all the time, so we can all just help each other out. And that's kind of the fundamental thing that I'm trying to do here.
Are there any, you talked about adding GC equals 0 for read-only access to the
Yeah.
database. Are there any points in TaskWarrior that that'll be an automated thing where it doesn't have to be manually added to the query?
There are some, and those are the read-only things. So if you do, I think it's task commands. So if you run task commands, it actually shows you all of the commands in a nice tabular format. And I don't have this hooked up to actually share my screen here, but so it shows which of those are read only and which of them are read write. So anything that's read only automatically doesn't opens the database in read only mode. But those are things like the task info, task columns that shows you the columns for a particular report, task commands that shows you the commands. So they're not the things you probably use more often, which are the custom reports that have task data and columns in it. And most of those have either GC or what's the other column? Um, they either do GC or recurrences when they run. So like if you run history, it's going to look at all your recurrences and add any new recurring tasks, and it's going to look at your working set and make sure that it removes anything that's not pending anymore. And those are both writing operations. So even though that seems like it's mostly read only, it actually does do a little bit of writing, and that's just the structure of TaskWarrior since time immemorial. So those are the cases where if you add GC equals 0, we'll skip that recurrence, it'll skip that working set stuff and just read from the database. But things that don't apply those don't have those columns filled in on the task commands output. So you see how those work.
And is GC short for something? Is there a mnemonic to help me
Yes,
remember?
it's short for garbage collection.
Ah,
Um, probably not the way things have evolved in TaskWarrior. It's sort of a confusing term, and there's actually a bug open to try and change that term, but sometimes that just causes more confusion. So I'm not convinced we should do it. But yeah, it comes from the memory management software where you're looking for things that aren't needed anymore and doing the final disposal of those. So it's looking for tasks that are marked completed but still have an ID, like a short numeric ID, and it moves those, it gets rid of those. And the recurrence isn't about garbage, but it happens in the same process. So yeah, weird term for it, but that's what it means.
okay, that seems interesting.
Yeah.
Speaking of recurrence, it was something that came up a couple of weeks ago. Um, I believe there's a document describing a better possible state of recurrence that someone could take on if they were extremely ambitious. Is
Um,
that right?
I haven't looked at that in quite a while, but last I looked at it, it was incomplete and more of a kind of set of ideas about recurrence. I think it's like 10 years old. It's quite old. Um, so I wouldn't say
Okay.
that's ready to be picked up, regardless of degree of ambition. I think the general idea of doing it, of making a new way of doing recursion, sorry, recurrence, making a new way of doing recurrence, that is something that someone who's ambitious and interested could pick up. And there's information to be had in that RFC that's older. There's lots of issues and comments on issues since then that should be taken into account. Um, and I think that would start with, let's write a new RFC, a new document that says this is a different way to do recurrence. Here's how it suits all these different needs. Here's how it does better than the existing model. And here's how we're going to make it interoperate with the existing model, right? Are we going to make a breaking change, or are we going to support both at once, or are we going to kind of migrate old recurrence into new recurrence? Think about pros and cons of all of those. So someone needs to think pretty comprehensively about that design before they start writing code. But I would love to have that happen. It's not something I'm going to do in the next couple of years. It's not really on my radar, but I would certainly support someone that wanted to do that.
And I think that's one of the cool things about an open source project like this, that everyone has their own interests and can bring their own passion to the project.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I find it one of the most exciting and interesting things about doing software development is just working with people that are doing something that they're interested in and I can help them with, and then I'm doing something I'm interested in and they can help me with that, and this kind of collaboration just it makes cool stuff and it's fun to do.
Yeah, totally. Well, Dustin, I am out of questions. Anything else that you want to give us today?
No, I think just a short day.
All right then. Well, thank you very much.